It was a cold and lonely night in the small farming town of Willow Creek. The wind moved through the empty fields, carrying the smell of rain and soil. The moon was half hidden behind dark clouds. Only one house still had lights on, the old wooden farmhouse of Eli Thompson. Eli was not a rich man. He lived a simple life, growing vegetables and raising a few cows and chickens. People in town often said he was strange. He didn't talk much, didn't go to church often, and spent most of his time alone with his animals. But those who really knew him knew that he had a kind heart. That night, as Eli was about to close his barn door, he saw something, a flash of blue light falling from the sky. It moved fast, cutting through the clouds like a comet, and crashed into the far side of his field with a loud boom. The ground shook under his feet. Eli froze for a moment. His heart started beating fast. "What in the world was that?" he whispered. He grabbed his flashlight and shotgun, then ran across the muddy field. The smell of burnt grass filled the air. When he reached the spot, he saw a small crater in the ground, smoke rising from it. In the center lay a metal pod, glowing faintly about the size of a water tank. It was strange, smooth and silver, covered in small blue lights that blinked weakly. Eli slowly stepped closer. The pod made a soft humming sound like it was alive. He raised his flashlight and gasped. There was something inside. Through a small glass window, he saw a figure curled up, small, shaking, and covered in mud. It looked human, but not quite. Its skin had a faint green-gray tone. Its hair was messy and full of dirt. Its eyes were closed. Eli could see small burns on its arms. The smell was terrible, a mix of chemicals and smoke. "Good Lord," Eli said softly. "What are you?" The pod suddenly hissed, steam escaping from its sides. Eli jumped back, pointing his gun, but then the top opened slowly, and the creature took a deep breath. It coughed, trembling, trying to move. Eli could see now it was a girl, maybe 15 or 16 years old. Her face was dirty, and her clothes were torn and strange, made of thin metallic fabric. She looked weak, scared, and lost. Eli lowered his gun. "Hey, easy now," he said gently. "You're hurt." The girl opened her eyes, and they were silver, glowing faintly in the dark. She looked at Eli, confused, then tried to speak. Her voice was soft and broken. "Don't hurt me." Eli's heart softened. "I won't," he said. "You need help." He wrapped his coat around her and carried her back to the farmhouse. She was cold as ice and smelled strange, like burnt metal. The cows in the barn grew restless when Eli entered, but they soon quieted down as if they understood something he didn't. He placed her on a small bed of hay near the fire stove and brought her some water. She looked at it for a while before sipping slowly, her hands shaking. "What's your name?" Eli asked. The girl blinked as if trying to remember. Luma," she whispered. "Luma," Eli repeated. "All right, Luma. You're safe here." She nodded weakly, then fell asleep. The next morning, word had already spread around town. Someone said they saw lights falling near Eli's farm. By noon, 2 neighbors came to see what happened. They found Eli outside fixing his fence like nothing was wrong. "Hey, Eli," one of them laughed. "Heard you caught yourself a UFO last night." "Yeah," the other added. "Don't tell me you're keeping aliens as pets now." They laughed loudly, but Eli only smiled. "You folks shouldn't believe every story you hear," he said calmly. After they left, Eli returned to the barn. Luma was awake, sitting quietly, watching the chickens through the window. When she saw him, she smiled, a small, shy smile that made his heart ache. She tried to talk again, her English broken. "Home. Gone. Sky. Fire, run!" Eli didn't understand everything, but he could see the pain in her eyes. He knew one thing: she wasn't dangerous. She was just lost and scared. He gave her food, helped her clean up, and found her an old dress that once belonged to his sister. Luma looked different now, still strange, but somehow peaceful. Her eyes no longer glowed so bright. That night, Eli heard her humming softly, a tune he'd never heard before. It was calm, almost otherworldly. The air around her seemed warmer. But just as he was about to close his eyes, he noticed something outside the window. A red light, blinking slowly in the sky. It hovered for a moment, then disappeared into the clouds. He frowned. "Probably a plane," he muttered. Still, something in his gut told him this was just the beginning. Later that night, as the rain started again, Luma stirred in her sleep. She whispered something, a word that made Eli freeze. She said his name. Eli, he looked at her shocked. How do you know my name? He whispered, but she didn't answer. She was already asleep again, her face calm, almost glowing in the dim light. Eli sat there for a long time, watching the strange girl from the stars. He didn't know who she was or why she came, but deep inside, he knew one thing for sure. His life would never be the same again. Morning light spread across the fields of Willow Creek. The air was cool and calm, but inside the old farmhouse, Eli's mind was still restless. He couldn't stop thinking about the strange girl sleeping in his barn. The image of her glowing eyes, her soft voice saying his name, kept returning again and again. He made breakfast, fed the animals, and tried to act normal, but everything around him felt different now. Even the cows seemed quieter, as if they sensed something unusual had arrived on this land. When Eli walked into the barn, Luma was awake. She sat near the fire, holding a piece of bread carefully like she had never eaten human food before. Her silver eyes followed every small thing, every sound, every shadow that moved. "Morning," Eli said, trying to sound calm. She looked up and nodded slowly. "Morning," she repeated softly, her accent strange but gentle. Eli brought her more food. "You feeling better?" he asked. She smiled a little and said, "Better." Her words were few, but her eyes were full of emotion. She looked outside the window at the wide open sky. "No fire," she whispered. "Good sky." Eli didn't understand much, but he could tell she was afraid of something above. Maybe the thing that brought her here. Maybe the ones who wanted her back. As days passed, Luma started helping him around the farm. She moved slowly at first, learning each tool, each animal, watching how Eli worked. She laughed softly when the chickens followed her. She touched a broken water bucket once, and Eli saw something strange happen. The crack on the wood closed itself like it was never there. He blinked, not believing what he just saw. Luma looked at him, worried. "Sorry," she said quietly. Eli shook his head. "Don't be, that was amazing." From that day, Eli began to see more of her hidden nature. Flowers she walked past stood taller. Sick animals started to eat again. Even the old apple tree that hadn't grown fruit in years began to show small blossoms. Luma was not like any being from Earth. There was something pure and alive in her, something powerful yet kind. But the world outside didn't share his wonder. People in the town kept talking. Some said Eli had lost his mind. Others said they saw strange lights near his farm again. A group of young men even came one night, shouting jokes from the road, calling him alien lover. Eli ignored them, but he saw how Luma's eyes turned sad after hearing their laughter. Later that night, Eli sat with her near the fire. "People laugh when they don't understand," he said. "It's easier for them to make jokes than to believe in something new." Luma looked at him and asked softly, "You believe me?" Eli nodded. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I know you're not bad. That's enough for me." She smiled for the first time, a real smile that made her look almost human. "Thank you, Eli," she whispered. Days turned into weeks. Luma learned more words. She began to laugh more. Eli almost forgot she was not from this world. But one night something broke the peace again. A low humming sound filled the air. The animals grew restless. Eli stepped outside and looked up. In the sky, a small object moved slowly, shining red and white lights. It wasn't a plane. It was too quiet, too smooth. The object stopped above his farm. Then a thin beam of light scanned across the field, moving closer to the barn. Eli ran inside. Luma was already standing near the door, eyes wide with fear. "They find," she whispered. "They find me." Eli didn't know what she meant, but the panic in her voice was real. The beam reached the barn wall, glowing through the cracks. Suddenly, Luma's eyes began to shine brighter than before, silver light spilling from them like small stars. The beam outside flickered once, twice, then the sky went dark. The object vanished into the clouds as if something pushed it away. Silence filled the air. The animals calmed down again. Luma fell to her knees, breathing hard. Eli rushed to her side. "What did you do?" he asked. She looked at him with tired eyes. "Stop them," she whispered. "They look for me. Must hide." Eli helped her stand. "We'll hide you, I promise." He didn't understand what kind of danger she was in, but now he knew something bigger was happening. The strange lights, the pod, the drone, it wasn't over. Someone or something was searching for her. That night, as Luma rested again, Eli sat by the window watching the stars. He thought about the men in town who laughed at him. They had no idea what was coming. He looked back at Luma, her soft glow lighting the barn. She wasn't just a visitor. She was a secret the world wasn't ready for. The morning sky was gray when Eli heard the first truck. It came down the dirt road fast, kicking up dust behind it. He stepped out of the barn and watched as a black vehicle stopped near his gate. Two men got out wearing suits that didn't belong in a farming town. Their shoes were clean, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses. One of them smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," he said in a cold voice. "We're looking for something that might have landed near here a few weeks ago. Did you see or hear anything unusual?" Eli kept his face calm. "No, sir. Just the usual storms. Nothing special." The man's smile faded. "Strange. Our instruments show a high-energy signal around this area. Something foreign, not from this planet. Maybe you found something and didn't understand what it was." Eli met his stare. "I find rocks and mud, same as everyone else." The second man walked slowly along the fence, looking toward the barn. He touched a small device on his wrist that made a soft beeping sound. "Signal's weak, but still here," he said quietly. Eli's heart began to race. Inside the barn, Luma was hiding under the floor hatch he had built the night before. She was silent, not even breathing loud. The men moved closer, pretending to be friendly, asking more questions, but Eli stood firm. After a while, the man in glasses sighed. "Well, if you see anything strange, contact us." He handed Eli a card. It had no name, only a symbol that looked like a triangle inside a circle. Some things are better left in professional hands. When they finally drove away, Eli waited until the sound of the engine faded before rushing to the barn. He lifted the hatch. Luma crawled out, her face pale and frightened. "They know," she said softly. "They come again," Eli nodded. "Then we'll be ready next time." He didn't know how to fight men like that, but he knew how to protect his own. Days passed, but peace never returned. Strange cars began parking on the road at night. Lights blinked in the distance. The animals grew nervous again. Luma spent most of her time hiding, whispering words in a language Eli couldn't understand. Sometimes her skin shimmered faintly like starlight trapped beneath the surface. One evening, Eli asked, "Who are they, Luma? Why are they after you?" She looked up slowly. "Not all humans bad," she said. "But some take me. In place far away. White walls, pain, they call me X, I run. They follow." Eli's chest tightened. "They experimented on you?" She nodded, eyes wet. "I come to Earth not to fight. I bring life. Heal worlds. But they hurt. They say they make weapon." Eli sat in silence. The fire crackled between them. He couldn't believe the cruelty of his own kind. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly. Luma looked at him. "You help, you kind. I trust." The next night the storm returned, heavy rain and thunder shaking the sky. Eli lay awake listening to the wind. Then he heard it, a soft click near the window. He looked outside and saw two figures moving near the barn, flashlights cutting through the dark. His heart stopped. They had come back. He grabbed his coat and slipped out the back door. The men were planting small metal devices in the ground. One of them spoke into a radio. "Tracker placed. Signal confirmed." Eli picked up a stone and threw it far toward the trees. The noise made the men turn their lights that way. While they checked the sound, Eli ran to the barn and opened the hatch. "Luma, we have to go now." She looked confused but saw the fear in his eyes and nodded. She grabbed a small blanket and followed him into the night. Rain poured over them as they ran through the fields, mud splashing under their feet. In the distance, headlights appeared again, chasing fast. Luma turned and raised her hand. A flash of silver light burst from her palm. The headlights blinked out. The engine died. The field fell silent except for the rain. They kept running until they reached the old forest beyond the farm. Hidden under the trees, Eli finally stopped to catch his breath. Luma leaned against him, trembling. "No safe," she whispered. "They follow always." Eli looked at her and said, "Then we'll keep moving till we find a place they can't reach." She nodded slowly. For the first time, Eli saw a mark on her neck, faint but clear. It was a small pattern of numbers and letters burned into her skin. A government code. Eli touched it gently. "They did this to you?" She nodded again, her eyes shining with tears. Eli's voice grew firm. "Then they'll have to go through me to get you back." Above them, lightning flashed across the sky, bright and wild. The rain washed the dirt from her face, and for a moment her silver eyes reflected the storm like two small stars trying to survive the darkness. The forest was dark and endless, and every sound felt alive. Eli and Luma moved quietly through the wet grass, their clothes heavy from the rain. Somewhere behind them, dogs barked and engines growled in the distance. The hunters were back, and this time they wouldn't stop. Luma's steps were light but weak. Her skin glowed faintly under the moonlight like silver smoke following her. Eli could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else, a strange calmness, as if she had been running her whole life. They crossed the river using fallen logs. The water was cold, biting their legs. On the other side, they hid under thick branches, breathing fast. Eli listened for the sound of the trucks, but the forest was quiet again, only the wind moving through the trees. "We can't keep running forever," he said finally. His voice was low but steady. "We need somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't find us." Luma looked at him, her voice soft. "No safe on Earth. They have eyes everywhere." Eli shook his head. "We'll find a way. You saved me once, now let me save you." She smiled faintly, her silver eyes dim in the dark. "You kind, Eli. Too kind for your world." They kept moving deeper into the forest until dawn. The sky turned pale and birds started singing again. Eli found an old hunter's cabin, half broken, half buried in vines. They went inside. The air was dry and smelled of wood and dust, but it was shelter. Luma sat near the window looking outside. "They follow with machines," she said. "They track the mark." She touched the small code on her neck and closed her eyes. The faint lines began to fade like smoke vanishing from paper. When she opened her eyes again, the mark was gone. "No signal now," she said quietly. Eli smiled for the first time in days. "Good. Then we've got some time." He started a small fire and cooked what little food he had. Luma ate slowly, watching the flames. She looked tired but peaceful. "Fire is life," she said. "We had fire too in the stars, but ours never burned." Eli watched her closely. "You remember your home?" Luma nodded. "A world full of light. We traveled to dying places to heal them. Your world called us long ago. But when I came, humans found me first, not the ones who called. They trapped me. They wanted my power to make weapons." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were full of pain. Eli didn't know what to say. He only whispered, "I'm sorry." She looked at him and said, "You are different. You protect life." Hours passed. The forest outside grew quiet again. For a moment it felt like peace. But peace never lasts long when someone is being hunted. By evening, the ground began to shake slightly, a low vibration that came from far away. Luma stood up suddenly. "They come," she said. Eli ran outside and saw it too, a black helicopter cutting through the clouds, coming straight for them. He grabbed her hand and they ran. The trees whipped past them as bullets tore through branches. The sound was deafening. Luma stumbled, but Eli pulled her up again. She turned and raised her hand. A wave of white light burst out, pushing the helicopter off balance. It spun out of control and crashed behind the hills with a loud explosion. The shockwave threw them both to the ground. Eli crawled to her side. She was breathing hard, her skin glowing brighter now. "Luma, you have to stop. You'll hurt yourself," he said. She shook her head. "Must protect." Her glow faded slowly and she looked weak, almost fading. Eli lifted her in his arms and carried her through the smoke. They reached the road that led out of the forest. A passing truck driver stopped when he saw them. Eli begged for help, said Luma was sick. The driver nodded and let them in without questions. As the truck moved farther away, the forest burned behind them. Black smoke rose into the gray sky. Eli looked at Luma, resting her head against his shoulder. "You're safe now," he whispered, though he wasn't sure it was true. Luma opened her eyes just a little and said softly, "No safe till they gone." Eli looked out the window. He could see more lights on the horizon, more vehicles moving fast. The hunt wasn't over yet, but he wasn't going to give her up no matter what. She had brought something into his life, something powerful and fragile at the same time, hope. And even if the whole world turned against them, he would fight for her until the very end. The truck drove on through the dark road, and somewhere in the sky above them, a faint shimmer of silver light followed quietly, unseen by human eyes. The sun had already set when the truck finally stopped near the edge of an abandoned town. The driver said this was as far as he could go, and Eli thanked him before helping Luma out. Her steps were weak, her glow dimmer than before. The long run had taken too much from her. The old buildings stood silent around them, broken windows staring like empty eyes. They found shelter inside an old school half covered in vines. The walls were cracked. The air smelled of dust and rain, but it was quiet. Luma sat down on the floor, her head resting against the wall, her breathing slow and heavy. Eli tore a piece of his shirt and wiped the dirt from her face. "You're burning up," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "Too long from home. My body not made for your air." Eli's chest tightened. "Then we have to fix that." He left her resting and searched the nearby rooms for food or medicine. There wasn't much left, but he found a few bottles of clean water and a half-broken first aid kit. When he came back, Luma was staring out the window at the stars. "They still look the same," she whispered, "even after all this pain." Before Eli could answer, they both heard it, the distant echo of engines. He froze. "They found us again." Luma stood up, though she could barely stand. "No more running," she said. "If they take me, you must go." Eli shook his head. "Not without you." The sound grew louder. Trucks stopped outside the old school and men in armor poured out holding weapons that hummed softly. The door burst open and bright lights filled the room. Eli tried to protect Luma, but a sharp flash hit him from behind. Everything went black. When Eli opened his eyes again, he was in a small metal room tied to a chair. His head ached and his mouth was dry. Across the room, behind a thick glass wall, he saw Luma lying on a table surrounded by machines. Wires were attached to her arms, her chest, her head. She wasn't moving. A voice came from the speaker above him, calm and cold. "Mr. Thompson, you found something that doesn't belong to this world. We will take care of it now. You should be proud. You helped us locate her," Eli shouted. "You're hurting her. She's not your experiment." The voice ignored him. "She carries energy beyond anything known. Enough to power nations or destroy them. We can't let it escape." He pulled against the restraints, but they didn't move. His eyes filled with anger and helplessness. Through the glass, he saw Luma's fingers twitch. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing brighter and brighter. The machines around her began to spark. The scientists backed away, shouting orders. One of them ran toward a switch, but the lights went out before he could reach it. The glass cracked. Eli heard a loud humming sound that shook the room. The metal cuffs around his wrists snapped open as if melted by heat. He ran toward the door, kicking it open. The hallway outside was filled with smoke and red warning lights. Alarms screamed through the building. Eli followed the sound of her voice echoing faintly through the noise. "Eli," she called softly. He reached the lab just as the last of the glass wall shattered. Luma was standing weak but free, her eyes bright as the stars. The air around her shimmered like heat. She looked at him and smiled. "I knew you would come." Eli rushed to her side, helping her walk. "We have to leave now." They moved through the burning corridors together. Every door they passed flew open as if the building itself obeyed her. Soldiers appeared, but their weapons failed one by one, sparks flying from their barrels. Luma's steps left small trails of light on the floor. When they reached the exit, the night sky opened before them. The facility was hidden deep in the desert, and the air smelled of smoke and sand. Behind them, explosions lit up the dark. Luma stopped and looked back, her face full of sorrow. They will never stop. They fear what they do not understand. Eli held her hand tighter. "Then let's keep going till there's nowhere left for them to find us." She nodded weakly and leaned on him. Her light began to fade again. "The world is sick, Eli. I wanted to heal it. But maybe humans must first learn kindness before they can be saved." He looked at her, his eyes full of worry and love. "We'll find a way. I promise." The desert wind rose around them, carrying the smell of burning metal from the lab. The night sky shimmered faintly, and far above, one small silver light blinked in the darkness as if watching them. The night wind carried the sound of sirens across the desert. Red lights flashed behind them, but Eli and Luma kept moving, their shadows long under the pale moon. Each step felt heavier than the one before. Luma's glow was fading and her breath came slower. The sand whispered beneath their feet like the world itself was watching in silence. They walked until they reached the remains of an old gas station, half buried in dust. The sign was broken and the windows gone, but the roof still stood. Eli led her inside and sat her down on an old wooden bench. Her hands trembled as she tried to speak. "Too far from stars," she said softly. "Energy gone." Eli knelt beside her. "You'll be fine. You just need rest," she smiled weakly. "You always hope. That is what makes you strong." He looked at her with pain in his eyes. "No, that's what makes me foolish. I can't lose you now." Outside, the wind howled louder, carrying the sound of engines in the distance. Luma turned her head toward the noise. "They still follow." Eli stood up and walked to the window. He could see faint lights moving closer. Then we'll run again. But Luma shook her head. No more running. They want my power. If I use it again, I will not survive. I can stop them only once. Eli stared at her. You're not dying for them. Not for anyone. Luma reached for his hand and her skin was cold but her touch still gentle. You saved me from fear. I can save you from them. This is balance. He didn't let go. We'll find another way. There has to be one, she smiled. Eli, promise me something. When I'm gone, you keep living. You plant your fields again. You look at the sky and remember me not as a ghost but as light. He shook his head, tears in his eyes. Don't talk like that. We're going to make it through this. But the lights outside grew brighter now. The sound of tires grinding against gravel filled the air. Luma stood slowly, her body glowing faintly again. She looked fragile like glass, but her eyes burned with quiet strength. The soldiers surrounded the gas station, weapons raised. Loudspeakers shouted for surrender. Eli stood in front of her, his fists tight. You'll have to go through me first, he shouted. The soldiers didn't answer. They moved closer, their steps heavy on the sand. Luma looked at Eli one last time. Thank you, she whispered, for showing me kindness. Then her glow grew stronger until it filled the broken building with white light. The soldiers stopped shielding their eyes. Eli felt the warmth spread around him like standing in sunlight after a long storm. The air itself began to hum and the earth trembled softly. The first gun fired, but the bullet never reached him. It melted in the air, turning into dust. The rest followed and disappeared in the same way. The soldiers screamed as their machines failed one after another. The ground cracked open and a wave of light burst from Luma, spreading across the desert like a rising sun. Eli fell to his knees, unable to look at the brightness. The wind blew stronger, carrying voices he couldn't understand, a soft chorus that sounded like stars singing. The waves stretched farther, breaking through clouds, lighting up the night sky until everything became silent again. When Eli opened his eyes, the light was gone. The soldiers lay unconscious, the vehicles dead and smoking. The desert was quiet once more. He turned around, but Luma was no longer standing there. Only a faint shimmer floated in the air where she had been, like dust caught in sunlight. He whispered her name, but there was no answer. His heart ached like something had been torn from him, yet a strange peace filled the air around him. He looked up at the sky. The stars seemed closer, brighter than before. One of them blinked gently like it was alive. He knew it was her. Eli stayed there until the sun began to rise. The soldiers were gone, the vehicles turned to ashes as if time itself had erased them. He walked into the open desert alone, but not empty. When he reached his farm days later, the land looked different. The crops that once struggled to grow now stood tall and green. The soil smelled fresh and alive. Birds flew overhead, singing softly. Eli stood in the middle of his field and whispered, "You kept your promise. Luma, now I'll keep mine." He planted new seeds with steady hands, his heart still heavy but filled with quiet hope. Every night he looked at the sky and saw that same silver light watching over him. She was gone from this world, but not from his life. Seasons passed over the small town of Willow Creek. The fields that once stood dry now shimmered with life. Crops grew taller than ever, and the soil never turned hard again, even in the hottest summers. People in town talked about it in quiet voices, saying the farmer's land had been blessed by something not of this world. Eli worked alone each day with calm, steady hands. His hair had turned a little gray, but his eyes still carried that same soft light they had when Luma first came into his life. He didn't talk much about what happened in the desert. When people asked, he only said it was a miracle of nature. But at night, when the wind blew across the fields and the stars filled the sky, he would stop working and look up for that one silver light that never faded. They had laughed at him once when he took home the strange girl they called smelly and ugly, the creature they thought was a curse. They had mocked him at the market, said the lonely farmer had lost his mind. But now those same people came to his farm asking for seeds because his crops never failed. The earth around his land glowed faintly under the moon, and the air always smelled like rain. Sometimes children from the village ran to his gate to see the shining fireflies that only appeared on his land. They said the lights danced like stars close to the ground. Eli would smile and tell them to be gentle because every light carried a memory of kindness. At night, he would sit by the old barn where it all began. The crash site was long gone, covered with grass and flowers, but he still remembered every sound that night, the blue light, the smoke, the way Luma looked at him with fear and hope mixed together. He could still hear her voice saying his name like a secret from another world. He talked to her sometimes softly while feeding the animals or planting seeds. "You were right, Luma," he would say. "People can change. They just need to see love before they understand it." The people of Willow Creek did change. They stopped laughing at him. They started helping each other more, sharing food and stories. The town became warmer, friendlier, almost alive again. The same ones who once mocked him now said maybe the farmer wasn't crazy. After all, maybe he had found something. Pure when the rest of them only saw dirt. Years went by, and the world outside began to notice the strange energy around his land. Scientists came asking questions about the soil and the weather patterns, but Eli never gave them answers. He knew some things were not meant to be measured or sold. Sometimes at night the wind would carry a soft humming sound across the fields, like a song too gentle for human ears. The animals would lift their heads and listen. Eli would close his eyes and whisper, "You're still here, aren't you?" One summer evening as the sun set behind the hills, Eli sat near the old fence watching the golden light fade. The air was warm and full of quiet peace. Then he saw it, a small shimmer moving slowly above the field. It was faint like a spark at first, but then it grew brighter, turning silver and soft just like her eyes. He stood up and took a step forward. "Luma," he whispered. The light drifted closer and stopped right in front of him. For a moment the air smelled like the first rain after a long drought. The light pulsed once and he heard her voice inside his heart, not in words but in feeling a message that said thank you and goodbye. Eli smiled. "No goodbye. You're home now." The light flickered gently, then rose higher and joined the stars until it became one with the sky. The moment it disappeared, a gentle breeze swept across the field and every flower opened at once, their petals shining like tiny mirrors of the night. Eli felt no sadness, only peace. He knew love had done what fear could never do. It had changed everything. It had turned laughter into belief and pain into hope. That night the villagers saw the strange silver glow above the farmer's land. Some said it was a ghost, others said it was an angel. But everyone felt something deep in their hearts, a warmth they couldn't explain. Eli sat on his porch watching the stars until sleep came over him. In his dream he stood in a field of light and Luma was there smiling the same way she had the first day he brought her home. From that day on, people no longer laughed when they spoke his name. They said the lonely farmer once loved an alien girl and that love healed, not only the land but the hearts of everyone who saw it. And somewhere beyond the stars, a light kept shining. Over Willow Creek, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change the fate of an entire world.